All right, we're covering section 5.5. We are still dealing with order of operations, which is that please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Oops. And for 5.5, we are working with fractions. Okay, so same idea. Now we're just dealing with fraction numbers. So instead of just using normal rules for multiplying, dividing, add, subtracting sign numbers or integers that we've been doing, we're now adding fraction rules in with it. So this is getting a little more complex. So let's look at our first problem. This one's going to be the same style as the very last example that we did from 5.4. All right, so it's a fraction, obviously, because there's a numerator and a denominator. So that's what we're calling this one fractions. I led into it a little bit, like I said, in that last example from 5.4. But the way that we solve this is we solve everything in the numerator and leave it on top, everything in the denominator, leave it on bottom, and then divide at the very end. So we're looking at this top problem. We see that it's a subtraction problem, so we change it and change it. Oops, sorry. Change the sign is what we were doing. And so let me move this little red mark here first, and let's talk about this. What I see is a subtraction problem, which is this guy, and then I see a positive 5, okay? So what I'm doing is I am changing it to add and giving that sign, or changing the sign of the guy next to it. So that plus 5 became a minus 5. So I hope that that makes sense. So now I have the problem 8 plus a negative 5. It's an addition problem. Signs are different. One's positive, one's negative. So I subtract and take the sign of the bigger number. And the bigger number was positive 8, so it's going to be a positive 3. Okay? So that's where I get this answer from. All right, so if I'm dealing with the denominator, this is a subtraction problem. I will change it to addition and change the sign of the number next to it. So I have 8 plus a negative 5. Oops, sorry, not 8, 10. 10 plus a negative 5. Signs are different, so I'm going to subtract and take the sign of the bigger number. The bigger number is a plus 10, so it's a plus 5. Now, I told you that this fraction bar means divide. And if I could divide 5 into 3 evenly, I would divide. But since it becomes a decimal number, I'm going to leave it in this fraction form. Okay? So 3/5 is my final answer. All right, the next one is going to be 3 over 5. This whole thing is squared. All right, so we've got a fraction, 3 over 5, or 3/5, raised to the second power. So what I want you to see is whatever's inside of the parentheses, okay, is going to be the whole thing. So that 3 over 5 is what we take 2 of. Okay, so I have 3 over 5 times 3 over 5. So this problem is actually the same thing as this right here. 3/5 times 3/5, because it tells me I have this inside 2 times. Okay, they are multiplied together. It is not 2 times 3 is 6 and 2 times 5 is 10. That is not how this works. This is becoming 9/25. Do you see the difference? It's 3 times 3 is 9 and 5 times 5 is 25. Okay, so 9/25 is my final answer. If I could divide both the top and bottom by the same number and simplify this, I would. But I can't divide 9 and 25 by any of the same numbers, so 9/25 is my final answer. All right, the next problem I have is parentheses 5 over 4 plus 11 over 16. Okay, this is not squared, it's not raised to any exponent powers. It's just telling you to still follow the order of operations. Okay, follow these every time that we look at a problem. And this time we're going to add, right, 2 fractions together. So this is really not anything new. This is actually something from the 2 chapters ago in Unit 3. And so in Unit 3, we learned how to add fractions that have unlike denominators, okay? And so for us, this is how we do it. We know that we need a common denominator to either add or subtract fractions. To do that, I multiply my denominators together and I get 64 for both of the denominators. I know that my final answer will still have a denominator of 64. Okay? For me to find my top numbers, I multiply from the bottom to the top and get 44. And I multiply from the bottom to the top and I multiply 5 times 16 and I get 80. Okay? The red is on the right side because I went from bottom to top and I ended up on the right side. That's why it stays on the right. Okay, so that's how you do this. Now it's denominators both match, so it got brought over to the bottom, and we're going to add the numerators. So I have 80, what is it? 80 plus 44 is going to give me 124. Okay. Now, if this problem had one additional step, and that additional step looked like this, that's supposed to be a dot, sorry. This would mean that we would do parentheses, exponents, right? Everything inside there first, which I did, and I got this answer. So this whole piece became this. But I have this left over, right? Because let's say that that was the original problem. It included that times 3/4 step there. So at this point, we would need to take our answer from the fractions, rewrite it, and then multiply it times the 3/4. Okay? If I can simplify in the diagonals, I will. But 64 is not divisible by 3. But 4 goes into 4 one time, and 4 goes into 124 31 times. Okay, and so these circled numbers are what I have left. And remember, this is a multiplication problem. So after I am simplifying, I multiply straight across the top and straight across the bottom. Okay, and so 31 times 3 gave me 93, and 64 times 1 gives me 64. Now, if I can divide both the top and bottom numbers by the same number, I will, but I can't, so I am going to leave this as my final answer, even if it's improper. So it's okay, as long as your instructions ask you for that. In my open math, it's okay to leave it as an improper fraction. All right, so the next example is going to be 2/3 plus 1/2. This whole quantity is going to be squared. All right, so we're looking at your order of operations. First thing that we need to look at is parentheses, so that means we're going to take care of this addition fraction problem first. So we're adding fractions. I have 2/3 plus 1/2. I need to make sure that I have a common denominator, so I find that by multiplying my denominators together, and I find a new common denominator of 6. To find the new numerators, I multiply in both of the diagonals towards the top, so 3 times 1 is 3, and in the other diagonal, 2 times 2 is 4. Okay? I'm going to leave this and bring down what I haven't used, and that squared is what I have not used. So what I want you to see coming out of this is that 6 stays the same, the denominator came straight over, and I'm adding my numerators, and it becomes 7/6. Please notice that I brought over the squared, and so I've done my parentheses, and the exponents is the last thing, or the next thing that I need to look at for this. And so for me to find this answer, I need to take 2 of what I have inside, and so it's 7/6 times 7/6. And so I multiply straight across the top and get 49, straight across the bottom and get 36. So this is my final answer. All right, let's skip over a little bit to some more difficult problems. Okay, these problems have just multiple things to be taken care of. Okay, and so this is more fraction work, and I want to make sure that we can balance back and forth between the rules for fractions. So we're going to look at, let's see, I've got negative on the outside, I've got 1/3 squared plus 2 times 2/3. All right, so let's look at this. The negative on the outside on the far left side of this problem is understood to be a -1, right? -1 here. And that -1 is going to be multiplied times the answer that's inside that parentheses after it's been squared. On the other side of the plus sign, there's a +2, a whole number 2, times a fraction. So what happens first? Well, I look at my parentheses, and there's just a fraction inside both of those parentheses, so there's not anything that I can add or subtract or multiply or anything like that. So there's no parentheses to be done. There is, though, although, an exponent in here. And the exponent happens right here. So I have 2 of whatever's inside the parentheses. And so that means I have 1/3 times 1/3. It doesn't simplify, so I multiply across the top and across the bottom, and I end up with 1/9. So this piece is now 1/9. And I still have that -1 on the outside left over. Okay. I brought down everything that I haven't used, and then I go back to the drawing board. I've done with my exponents. Now I'm on to that multiply divide section. Okay. Multiply and divide, there are 2 different pieces that I need to multiply. This guy and this guy. And we multiply from left to right. So I'm going to multiply on the left side, -1 times 1/9, and it just becomes -1/9. Plus, I multiply on the left side, and I have 2, which is 2/1, times 2/3. Doesn't simplify, so I end up with 4/3 as this answer. Okay? All right, so now I've got an addition problem. Okay, it's an addition problem, so I don't need to change anything, but I look at the signs and I see one's negative, one's positive. Signs are different, so I'm going to subtract and take the sign of the bigger number. So we've got to decide which one's bigger. Okay, so 1/9 or 4/3. Well, we know that any fraction whose numerator or top number is bigger than the bottom number is the bigger number. And so that means that this 4/3 is actually the bigger number here. So it's positive. So that means my answer is going to be positive. And I need to subtract 4/3 minus 1/9 for me to get my final answer here. Okay. And so for me to do that, I need to find a common denominator, right? So I multiply and I get 27. It's a subtraction problem. Sorry, it got a little crazy. Multiply in the diagonal and I get 3. And I get 36 here. When I subtract, I end up with 27 still my denominator. 36 minus 3 gives me 33. So 33/27 is my final answer for this. Okay. All right. Let's do one last one. It's going to be -3 parentheses, -1 plus 6 times 6 plus 3 minus 8 squared. Okay, so we're looking at our order of operations. Okay. All right, so first thing that we need to do is we need to do everything inside the parentheses. So inside the parentheses, we know that we need to add first. This is an addition problem. Signs are the same, so you're going to add and keep the sign. So we end up with 6 plus 3 is 9. Okay, bring down things that I haven't used. Okay, continue to finish what's inside the parentheses. So I have a multiplication of 6 times 9, which is going to be 54. Bring down everything I haven't used. This is an addition problem inside the parentheses, and I have a negative and a positive. Signs are different, so I'm going to subtract and take the sign of the bigger number, which is going to be a positive 53. Bringing down everything that I haven't used yet. Okay. All right, so from here, I'm going to go back to the order of operations. Okay. So I've done parentheses, now I need to move on to exponents. And so I have a -8 squared. And so I want you to see that the squared only belongs to the 8. It would belong to the -8 and square the whole thing if there's parentheses around it. So we're actually just squaring the 8. So 8 times 8 gives me 64, and I'm going to bring down that subtraction or that negative sign. Okay, we're at the multiply stage, which is going to be 3 times 53, which is going to be a -159, because signs are different, so the answer is always negative. Bring down the -54. It's a subtraction problem, so I need to change the sign, So change it to add, change the sign of the one that follows. So now I have -159 plus a -64. Signs are the same, so I'm going to add the two numbers and keep the sign. And so the answer is going to be negative because I'm keeping the sign. And when I add those two together, I get a negative 223, final answer. All right, so make sure that you do your toyos and bring them to class.